Have you ever had an experience in life where you hear or meet somebody at just the right time when you needed it the most? Really think about this and realize that that is a God sign. That is a gift. Those little miracles, those little synchronicities of hearing or meeting someone just when you needed it the most. What I'm getting to at in this video is timing. God's timing, they say, divine timing. Expand your faith more on that. That will create less struggle in your life with whatever you're working towards, your dreams, relationships, your personal growth. Timing plays such a huge factor in our evolutionary growth and in our advancement and in our manifestation and just in everything that we do. So that's my daughter in the background. I don't edit myself. So what I wanted to say today about timing, to share an example of the brilliance of something bigger than us. I think it was almost 20 years ago. 25? Oh my gosh. Oh, a little over 20 years ago, I bought a book by Sidney Poitier called The Measure of a Man. I just read that book for the first time. I've owned that book for over 20 years. And it wasn't until a few months ago, little voice said it's time. And to learn to trust in that voice. It's not just airy-fairy. It's not in your imagination. You know, I've really played around with this idea, and I'm sure many of you can relate of when is it your intuitive voice and when is it just your imagination? Well, I really believe it was my intuitive voice because I've seen that book on my shelf. And when I read it the other day, it was a few months back, so it feels like the other day, I loved it. I got everything out of it that I needed. I was weeping with Sidney Poitier's writing and his stories, and it just touched my heart so much. If I would have read that book when I bought it, so here's what's interesting. When I got that book, I was going through one of the most traumatic experiences of my life. I was in an unhealthy relationship, very in love, yet this person was really struggling with his own childhood demons and pain. Body was really coming up and it was getting very dark. And I didn't realize this at the time, but I was going into the freeze. I was terrified, but I put on this smile and I just kept going. So when he and I went into Borders bookstore back then, and he bought a book on screenplay writing, this is in LA, and I bought this book, jumped out at me. I had never even seen, I'd heard of Sidney Poitier, but I didn't even really know his work. And I was like, The Measure of a Man. I need to read this book. I have to have it. And I remember we went to the Earth Cafe on Melrose and we sat down to read and I couldn't read. The words just, have you ever just like read something over and over again? And you're like, what did I just read? That's what was happening for me. When I read it 22 years later, I understand now. And it freaks me out in a cool way when I say that, because it shows we are not in control of this divine timing. We're in control of free will and bettering ourselves. However, there is a bigger plan. And when we have faith and trust in that, it's like, let that weight come off your shoulders and realize, just like with this example, I knew I was going to read that book one day and I didn't pick it up. I've seen it, like I said, but I didn't jump out at me until I was really ready to receive the message of the book. And that's a real thing. Our consciousness, each one of us are going through our own journey. And that's why we don't want to compare or judge or take things personally or really try to understand what somebody else is going through. I mean, we try to understand, but we can't, because we barely can understand our own consciousness and where we're at and when something is right for us. How dare we try to figure out what's right for someone else? We can only lead by example and show the way. And so with this example, it's so beautiful because I wouldn't change a thing. My ego would be like, how have I had that book for 20 years and I haven't read it? Just get rid of it. And I have cleaned out books. I have gotten rid of things, but something in me said, never get rid of this one. And once I read it, I realize why not to get rid of it, because the messages in it are so powerful and so beautiful and what I needed to hear at this time. And that back then, when a human being can't read or comprehend or take in the teachings, it's I think one of two things. One is we're not ready to hear it. So spiritually, our soul is not there. And the other is if you have had any kind of trauma that overwhelms your nervous system and creates a bit of this shutdown, it's very hard to read and take in information. That's what learning disabilities really are, is there's too much adrenaline and anxiety happening in the nervous system from trauma, from negative environments, from abuse, from not having those boundaries, or growing up in those environments when you don't even know what a boundary is, or you can't get away till you're old enough. Either way, when kids or adults have learning disabilities, and I can relate to this was me. I had a lot of trouble learning in school because my nervous system was overwhelmed. It wasn't until I got regulated and created boundaries and released my pain that now I can learn. I love reading now. I love learning now. So on a side note, if you're struggling with any children in your household or yourself or anyone you know, regulate the nervous system, because that helps all parts of the brain come back online. Because when you're in fight or flight, it's not a time to learn. It's a time to protect yourself. It's not a time to digest. That's what digestive problems are. I don't know why they don't teach us, and hopefully they will. One of the main things I wish I would have learned when I was a young adult or teen or maybe even elementary school is what happens to the brain and the body when we are overwhelmed, bullied, fight or flight, and how to create those healthy boundaries, how to get love and support so that we can feel safe, so we can learn and we can digest our food and we can feel healthy. So that was a little side note for learning and digestion, which I think are just two of the most important things in the world, right? We have to eat and we have to digest properly, and we want to learn. We want to take in good information to better ourselves. So growing up, a lot of us grow up in environments where, multi-generational trauma, people didn't know how to communicate and how to have boundaries, and we do now. So I want to help spread that message. And this goes back again to that divine timing. Trust that you will hear, maybe even this video, that you will find the right tools and the right people and the right support you need just when you need it the most. Just start with that. Just have faith and trust in your soul that connects to many other souls. There's an energy, there's a force field, call it God, call it the universe, that is watching us, that believes in us, that when we say, okay, I know you hear me and you believe in me, please send me what I need to better myself. And you want to ask, go ahead and ask. You deserve to ask, because they say if you don't ask, how's it going to come? So don't be afraid to ask, and be open to when something comes your way, and then trust in that timing of if somebody gives you a book but it doesn't feel right to read it, but you need to keep it, trust that timing when you're ready to read it will come, and don't beat yourself up for not reading it. So I hope this helps today in trusting a bigger plan for us, and to keep the ego and the pain body at bay of there's no shoulds, get rid of shoulds, there's no shame. You are where you're at, you're perfect where you are. And we're all doing the best we can. And all that matters is this moment going forward. So look at today as a start, a new you. Die to the old you. Die to the old self. We don't need that anymore. It's gone. Who are you today? And how can you trust more in your process of divine timing? And what you need will come.